Representatives of more than 50 countries meet on the sidelines of the NATO meeting in Brussels to discuss air defence for Ukraine.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin tells Europe he's ready to resume gas supplies and accuses the US of international terrorism.
UK's economy shrunk by 0.3% in the month of August, and the pound dropped significantly Tuesday night, renewing fears of a recession.
Western leaders are maintaining a united front following Russia's escalation in its war on Ukraine. At Tuesday's G7 meeting, they warned Russian President Vladimir Putin of severe consequences if he goes further and uses nuclear weapons. At the meeting, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky asked for more air defence systems and for an international monitoring mission on the Belarusian border. The UN and some NATO countries have also warned that Moscow may be committing a war crime with its continuing deadly blitz on civilian targets. Since Monday, roughly 30% of Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been hit by Russia, but Zelensky has been quick to reassure his people.
Where there was destruction, the infrastructure will be renewed. Where there were losses, there is already or will be construction. Where there are any hopes of the enemy, there will be ruins of the Russian statehood.
In St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin appeared to be in a conciliatory mood as he welcomed the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, even saying he was open to dialogue over the Zaporizhzhia power plant.
We are very glad to see you, and we are ready to discuss all issues of mutual interest or cause for concern. For example, regarding the situation around the Zaporizhzhia power plant.
And in Crimea, Russian authorities say they have detained 8 people in connection with Saturday's explosion on a key bridge. According to security services, those held are Russian, Ukrainian and Armenian.
The defense ministers of NATO and partners will discuss today all the latest regarding the escalation of the war in Ukraine. The top priorities for the Allies' contributions for Ukraine is to get Kiev more air defense as soon as possible. And it's expected that this issue will also be raised by the Ukrainian defense minister, who will also join the meeting. NATO also will do a nuclear deterrence exercise next week, which was scheduled a long time ago, but now it will happen in this new context of nuclear threats by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that any use of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons will have severe consequences for Russia. But he also stressed that the alliance hasn't seen any change of posture by Russia in this sense. Efi Koutsakosta, Euronews, Brussels.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said the ball is in the court of the European Union, declaring that he's ready to resume gas supplies to Europe. Speaking at the Moscow Energy Forum, Russia's leader also blamed the US for explosions that damaged pipeline links transporting Russian gas under the Baltic Sea.
There is no doubt that this is an act of international terrorism, the purpose of which is to undermine the energy security of the entire continent. Logic, cynical, to destroy, block sources of cheap energy, deprive millions of people, industrial consumers of gas, heat, electricity and other resources, and force them to buy all this at much higher prices. To force.
Several European governments claim that the pipeline explosions were a result of sabotage, but stop short of blaming anyone in particular. These and other acts of sabotage have frustrated EU efforts to combat inflation. EU energy ministers met in Prague on Wednesday to discuss a possible agreement on energy prices, which is set to be endorsed by EU leaders next week.
Polish authorities are investigating a leak in an underground pipeline supplying oil from Russia to Western Europe. The operating company, PERN, says it detected a leak in the Druzhba pipeline Tuesday evening. some 70 kilometres from the Polish city of Plock. It says the cause of the rupture wasn't yet known. The pipeline is the main route through which Russian crude is delivered to Germany. The news broke as EU ministers in the Czech Republic were discussing energy challenges arising from the war in Ukraine.
We are analysing this situation right now. I can confirm there is indeed a leak a few dozen kilometres from Plock. All the services are on the spot, including firemen and security services, and we're analysing the causes right now.
Last year, Russia accounted for around 35% of Germany's crude oil supply. But it and other EU countries have been finding other sources in line with sanctions against Moscow over Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Striking employees at this oil refinery in Normandy are reeling after the government announced it will use its emergency powers to force staff back to work. French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne gave the order yesterday in a bid to tackle ongoing fuel shortages. But union reps say they will go to court to get the requisition cancelled.
You have to know that we are going to fight against this because it clearly challenges the right to strike. We are saying, unfortunately, we are no longer in a state of law and freedom. Our right to strike is under frontal attack, but we are not going to let it happen.
Workers who refuse to return to work could face fines or jail time. The strikes affect 6 of the country's 7 refineries, 2 of which are owned by Esso ExxonMobil, while its rival Total Energies owns the other 4. The CGT union says strikers at Total Energies have renewed their calls for a 10% pay rise in line with inflation and soaring energy bills, while left-leaning political parties have vowed to march on Sunday against the cost of living crisis. The blockade has resulted in huge queues and fuel shortages at several filling stations around the country, particularly in Paris. Some departments have also introduced pump rationing to a maximum of €30 of fuel per tank.
Sparks flew at Prime Minister's questions on another volatile day for the British economy.
We will see higher growth and lower inflation.
Mr. Speaker, avoiding the question, ducking responsibility, lost in denial. No wonder investors have no confidence in her government.
Investors watching London's bond market saw the cost of government borrowing increase as yields on both 30-year and 20-year gilts passed 5%, a repeat of the market dynamic that saw the Bank of England intervene and buy bonds. This was a day after the bank's governor, speaking at the International Monetary Fund in New York, warned British pension funds the bank's daily purchases of government bonds wouldn't continue beyond Friday. And there was more bad news in the wider economy, with the Office for National Statistics revealing the UK economy unexpectedly shrank by 0.3% in August.
This was the first step into the world of Twitter for Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán this week. He recently launched his personal account, promising to make some noise. But you may be wondering, why now? Especially given the fact that Hungarians generally prefer Facebook over Twitter, there seems like there's little motivation for the conservative leader to suddenly join the social media platform. Well, to better understand this move, we have to remember that Hungary might lose 7.5 billion euros in EU funds for alleged fraudulent behavior and rule of law violations. And if Hungary doesn't get this money, it might further cripple its already faltering economy. And we spoke to Kim Lane-Sheppel, an expert on Hungary and the EU.
It's clearly aimed for the audience outside Hungary, and I think it's happening now because, there really is a kind of sword hanging over Orbán's head if these funds are cut.
So in addition to this new Twitter account, Orbán's PR team has also launched a podcast called The Bold Truth About Hungary. And the first episode aired yesterday, and it focused, unsurprisingly, on EU funds. So the strategy of Orbán's PR team is now to shift the focus off the corruption that the government is accused of and instead push this narrative, according to Kim Lane-Sheppel.
He wants to look like an ordinary European conservative who just happens to be attacked by ordinary European liberals. And if he can get this thing, if he can get his own government assessed on sort of ideological grounds, he may escape this kind of EU punishment.
So will Viktor Orban's last-ditch attempt at wooing Western audiences pay off? Well, the final decision will be voted mid-December by the Council of the European Union.